A lot of the work in beekeeping happens in the apiaries, and that's where a lot of the important stuff happens. But we often also like to look at the shiny stuff and think about the shiny stuff. And so we've got a couple of presentations now from a couple of beekeepers who have just gone through the process of building new honey houses. So if we're all dreaming of a new honey house, so hopefully this will sort of scratch that itch for us. Um, so I'll maybe ask Mike Roth to come up and share his experience. We'll be going to Mike and Erica's place this afternoon, so you'll get to see it in the flesh. But Mike's got a few slides in terms of the process they went through to build their honey house. So Mike's bio's up here. Nith Valley Apiaries. I love the part about reading old tractor magazines. We had a neighbor who gave us some farm magazines from 1951, and it's great to see the stuff advertised in there, isn't it? So I'll pass it over to Mike, and he can talk us through his slides.
All right, thank you. Welcome to New Hamburg. I've been calling this town home for about 10 years now. Grew up north of Stratford, very much a non-beekeeping family. My father was an electrician and kind of dreamed of farming, but it was always out of reach in the conventional sense. I got my start through church, basically. My parents' church had a beekeeper in it, and that was Alan Bankert. I kind of had an informal apprenticeship with Alan on this kind of a timeline, and about 4 years worked with him, but early on he was winding the business down, and the informal or underlying ultimatum was that if you're serious about getting into this, you got to say so and take it on. So I ended up going down that road, bought the business relatively early, and a few years later, the property ended up being part of the transaction, and we've been developing the honey business since. It's hard to know where to start. I don't know what all you guys know of the business or honey. The old building, to give you an idea, looked something like that. There's no hot water running in the building. Only a little bit was insulated. We had a steam boiler that heated the honey, and there's a little white doorway there went down into kind of a half basement retail area. And if you spill a honey jar or something and you need hot water to clean it up, you go downstairs and fire up the steam boiler. In about 10 minutes, there's steam pressure built up, and stick a garden hose that the steam was coming out of into a bucket of cold water, and it rattles and bangs and heats up that water until you can make scalding water, like really dangerous. But that cleans the honey up good, and it was kind of an antique start. No forklifts, no bottling machines, no labelers. I look back, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the till was a little bedside table, and we took cash and check and wrote the sales down in a duotang. And it was just dead simple. And Erica and I have a running joke. Whenever there's a problem with our current point of sale, I always suggest we could just go back to writing in a duotang, which I pretty near get smacked for now. I think the next slide, this is our current setup. We've made a lot of changes to the building. It's fully insulated. We have hot water on tap. We can clean up honey spills in a jiffy. There's a floor drain. There's a couple bottling machines and two honey pumps. And the extracting used to happen in here. Two Decembers ago, we had a fire in our workshop, And that's, I guess, kind of why we got asked to speak here. There was a real change of purpose in these buildings. And the extracting has moved out of this building now, and we've been turning it into a full-on honey processing building. None of the crude honey extracting happens here anymore. And this past summer was the first without bees flying all through the building, pooping on the walls, and that's made it a really nice building that way. We could go in a lot of directions here. I think the biggest things, I don't know if you can read, the retail site is on grade now, great for accessibility. Honey customers, it tends to be an older demographic, and tripping hazards are not a good liability to keep around. I can see I've written down, but the floor drains, honey pumps, heated tanks. We used to bottle honey off a bulk tank and stick it in an old oven to warm it up and make sure there's no granulation in that honey before it goes out to the customer. And then we eventually got a heated tank, and it's one of those things, you get one heated tank and you realize that's the way to go. It took me years to get onto cam lock hose fittings. I figured that out, and it's a simple technology that is it's just amazing, honestly. Rubber hoses and cam lock fittings and honey pumps and forklifts. You guys probably think I'm a bit crazy, but from where I started, it took me a while to learn these things, and they really help out. Here is the property. Quite a while back, before the fire, this workshop burned. Can I have a show of hands of colorblind people here? Okay. Well, I don't know how to use these laser pointers because I can hardly see them. This one here is a shop that burned, and that's where it was. And then we built a new building there. The fire happened really quickly. It was an electrical fire, ironically, because of some kind of pet ducks that we got from the neighbor and plugged in an old water bowl de-icer, one of the first cold nights of that December. And 6 a.m.-ish the next morning, we were told that our shed was on fire by a commuter who thundered up the porch steps and hammered on the door. Later that morning, the fire's out. I thought we could save the shop. I think the firemen came in and they knew it was just damage control. So the building went up good, all in all. I would not have said so in the moment. We, in our haste to get going with the rebuild, we chose a contractor who was not at all what he promised. But on this side of it, we've got a decent honey house. We got a lot of features in that we wanted. And then by July 2nd, we had the final inspection, and July, I don't know, 10th or so, had built a crude hot room in the corner, and we're extracting the first honey of the season. Floor drains in a honey house are phenomenal. The old honey house, it did have a floor drain, 4-inch circle, and all of our wash water from extracting, we're trying to fit down that 4-inch circular drain. And now you can just, the water just runs to that drain all on its own. And there's a clean out jet. At the end of the day, there's a pipe under the concrete. Open a valve and water just shoots down that drain, and it's like an automatic clean out. There's a debris trap that should have been in this drain, but due to the contractor, that didn't happen. Debris traps, floor drains with cleanouts are just really, really handy for honey cleanup. The high ceiling and lighting is made just really good environment. Extracting this summer was felt like a breeze. There's just much less fatigue. The bees don't fly around your head. They're up at the ceiling, out of sight, out of mind. Electrical drops down from the ceiling there. That turned out to be a really convenient way to do it, both set up and in use now. I really like that. The size of the building was limited by local bylaw and GRCA, and it's funny how constraints in life, if you don't have constraints, you don't really have direction, is kind of what we found. Considering the rebuild without a size limitation, it's like, well, how big do you go? How much debt do you take on? You could rebuild it 6 times the size and shoot for, I don't know, a huge operation. But that's incredibly stressful, especially on short notice. And eventually we found out that we could only build it so big, and that gave us clarity. And at the end of the day, constraints are kind of good. Sometimes I think about a fart in the wind. I mean, it's nothing, but a fart under the bed sheets, well, that gets results. Like, constraints really give us direction in life, despite the seeming stumbling block that they are. The loading dock outside, we built it to accommodate standard height trucks, but right now it's filled in with more gravel to be at the right height for our 1-ton trucks. And I would have liked to put a pallet scale down in the floor of the concrete somewhere, but we only we have a platform barrel scale, like old beam balance, and that's recessed in some temporary concrete outside. And there's a lot of these developments that are just going to take their time to get to. Some themes on our journey over the last 10 years. Early on, I came across a quote, every system is perfectly designed for the results it achieves. And I've had a love-hate relationship with that, because I've been designing the systems around here, and when they fail, it's my own fault. So then there's just no excuse. You got to fix it and make it better and better. More information doesn't necessarily make better decisions. We often just get stuck in decision-making paralysis instead of honing gut and intuition. It's a worthwhile skill. It's one that's very relatable to managing beehives, just going into a yard and absorbing the vibe, opening a hive, and by the sound of it, you almost know whether you need to take any action or not. And then somewhat that also applies to the business world, dealing with honey customers and making label changes. Like, there's a lot of stuff in life you can't put real numbers to. Scale does not equal success. The owner-operator efficiency that I learned from Alan, I haven't been able to match. Although I think my experience is starting to help. We've grown in ways that I don't think we'll ever be able to replicate the efficiency of a one-man owner-operator, a husband and wife team is what it was. As soon as you add in payroll and try and communicate your ideas to people to get work done, there ends up being more slippage. And over the last 10 years, our gross income has, I think, it's roughly doubled, but the margin has not. So scale and success are not necessarily a correlation. In a lot of ways, we should have stayed smaller. And smaller hive numbers, you manage those hives more intensively, and in theory, you get a bigger honey crop, although this has not been my experience. Early on, we got a bumper year, like 270 pounds a hive. And if you don't go with the times, you go with the times. That's been an interesting quote that I keep on thinking of. And to live in my early years of beekeeping and expect a big honey crop per hive, that justifies intense management. and lots of room for hive inputs, both time and I don't know, medications. And the reality is now in the 2020s that, I don't know, 100 pounds of hive isn't even guaranteed. And if you have 100 pounds of hive at 250 a pound, your basic budget for running those hive, each hive per year, is $250, and that gets eaten up really fast. Like you cannot spend 40 minutes a hive, you cannot spend 10 minutes a hive on average. You just and that's ironically the way the enjoyable pace of the hobbyist that got me into bees, and to put in that time in a relaxed manner made it super enjoyable. And then I went and commercialized it. And the summers are often a lot of stress, and you got to get through the beehives and get on to the next thing. And then you're searching for a different kind of satisfaction in the job. There's a interesting balance there, searching for the sweet spot. There's been enough bee puns, but not so much the honey sweet spot, but the balance in all of these dynamics. Having retail on site, that's quite a dynamic. It's got its advantages and disadvantages. And considering our location here in New Hamburg, we've had the privilege of taking on an established brand, proximity to markets on the edge of KW, southwestern Ontario. We have good bee territory. We have customers that come, like a third of our honey, roughly, we sell farm gate, and 2/3 we ship out to stores and restaurants. There's a lot of things that come together really nicely, but then that's also at the expense of privacy. When you have the honey house on site, on your residential site, and customers coming, employees coming to work. Yeah, the balance, finding that sweet spot. I think it's what we're all doing. It's just often feels like a receding goalpost. A couple really neat concepts come in Feng Shui, and crime prevention through design is another similar line of thinking that I came across a few years ago. This has to do with setting up a property or a room to flow, and honey house layouts would fall into this. Whole properties, apiaries, choosing an apiary site that is way off in the bushland is kind of appealing, but if someone's going to steal those hives, no one's going to see it. So then you start thinking about lines of sight, both around your honey house, like the orientation of our new building. We went back and forth a few times wondering how we can get the best visibility of the entrance from the house, and what things is that building going to block, and once it's there, how is the property going to feel? Does it open up and feel inviting for customers? Does it lead customers to the wrong building? There's a story about a designer back in the 80s that built some new university campus and just planted grass everywhere between the parking lots. And after the university had run for a year, it was very obvious where the paths should be. There's like well-worn grass tracks or mud tracks in the grass of where the path should be, and the rough size to accommodate the university foot traffic. And a lot of these things you don't really know until you use them. But considering Feng Shui and the crime prevention through design, there's some website about that. That helps to set up a new property and honey houses, and CFIA will also have input in food facilities. Having windows and dead corners in a building where things can happen is something to consider. Product flow through a building, foot traffic and processing needs to be kind of separated, and retail off on another side. Product flow through a building ends up being a big thing, and it's a constant evolution. we've moved a few walls in the buildings at home, and it's kind of a joke that, you know, just probably move in a few years. There's no sense really doing a great job on the mudding and painting. It's just, we'll keep on changing things before the paint dries. Metacognition, little word I learned in high school. We had one of those eccentric English teachers who no one really liked him, but he had a few neat ideas. And thinking back on your thinking, we all thought he was, you know, out to lunch, but I think it really is a helpful thing. And in winter, us beekeepers are bound to take advantage of the slower season and think about what got us, what worked, what didn't. Back to the product flow. If you're handling honey and you have to lift it, that's okay. But the more you can mechanize, the happier you'll be. Once you start dealing with, say, 10,000 pounds of honey, if there's one step you can mechanize in getting that honey from your hive onto your truck, that's 10,000 pounds you didn't have to lift. That's 10,000 pounds that's not contributing to sciatic pain or carpal tunnel, or I don't know, there's a big list of things. But, and then if you end up producing 100,000 pounds of honey, and there's 5 steps that you could have eliminated had you bought better equipment, that's 500,000 pounds of honey that you handled it, or your team handled, that you wouldn't have had to. So planning good product flow is really pays off. Product flow as the whole operation starts in the bee yards. And we can talk about planning bee yards. Sometimes we inherit bee yards. Sometimes we knock on people's doors and try and plan our own. But you need a 4-wheel drive bee truck, a flatbed. Diesels are nice. New ones are nice. That's not been my reality. And over the years, we really whittled down. You dial stuff in slowly. Big toolboxes and a water tank for hand washing is really they're essentials on a bee truck. When I started working for Allen, it was basically a stake side truck. The sides fold down in 2 stages, but we didn't tie or bind anything down. And I went down to Tasmania to keep bees about 8 years ago, and I learned load binding down there. Like I had to travel down to the southern hemisphere to figure this one out, when I could have just worked for another beekeeper and learned here in Ontario. But yeah, now we load bind the supers and everything on the truck. The small items go in the toolboxes, and it's a much better system. Good access to bee yards means you get your work done. You're not stuck as in this picture, and you're not double guessing whether you can make it in. Like, you know, you can go and get to the bees, you go and do your work on time. Planning the bee yard's location, we've had a few that are in nice clearing in the woodlot, and they're really picturesque in some senses. And then come like the dog days of summer, and you got to get to those yards and do them early before the sun shines in there, because they just get sweltering, and heat stress can be a big risk for beekeepers. And having a few guys with you can work through a yard fast and then get a nice cool down drive to the next bee yard, that can be a savior for the longevity of the workday. Having do not die juice on hand really helps too. This is somewhat of a joke for us, but a beekeeper working with us a few years ago coined the term "do not die juice." It's just it's not beer, it's not like meat or anything bad. On the contrary, my wife started making it for us. It's a mint, sting, nettle, lemonade, electrolyte iced tea kind of a thing. And having good hydration in the bee yards is just, that's been the big thing. We also in the bee yards have standby nukes, usually about 6 per yard for queen replacement. It was neat hearing Eugene's talk yesterday about actually managing nukes as colonies. We've always looked at these standby nukes as just sources to grab a queen from. And they think they can be more than that. But nuke management is definitely different than hive management. Still in the bee yards, getting on the harvest. Using a backpack blower took me a number of years to get onto that. Another thing I would not go back from. We started with fume boards and a stationary blower. And at this point, we're backpack blowing, stacking them on full-size skids in the truck, and lifting 6 stacks of supers off with the forklift back at the facility. And I guess mixed into all this is the realization that we're just at a really particular point in development. I think of the 2 and 3 generation beekeeping businesses out there, and I mean, are probably bored as flies listening to this, but these are development steps that we're all on somewhere. And the more we can share and learn, like we can save each other hurdles. I mean, it shouldn't have taken me 6 years to learn about load binding and 6 years to come across cam lock hose fittings, but it does. In the extracting end of it, automation again. We had an old extractor with a slip clutch and put a variable frequency drive motor and timer on it. You just hit that extractor and it does a 3-minute cycle. You don't think twice. Mechanical honey creamer. And good lighting, facility design, and improvement. It just makes everything work really good. Yes, here is how we used to stack supers in the bee truck. And then even if they're empty supers at the back, it's still a pain to clean up. Wax spills, it's part of the system that I designed. I should have maybe designed it differently. And when it goes good, that's just a nice little reward. Final thoughts. I think we would do a lot of things different on the building if we could. But the floor drains, hot water heat. We use hot water heat in the hot room, which has worked really well. I used to build my own woodenware, a few accidents with the table saw, and I leave that to the Mennonite shops in the area. We're really lucky in Ontario with the resources in that capacity. Manufacturing technology is, there's a lot of it around, both for stainless equipment, woodenware, and innovations. I feel like we have a lot of at our fingertips. Sugar syrup has been another thing. We used to buy skids of it from Costco and mix here. And a number of years I got onto getting totes of it in, and a lot of drudgery fall work has just vanished. Moving forwards, we're looking at CFIA certification for our buildings, and that'll help the packing end of the business. Working with Edgar Invest and SDRM programs, you need to keep your own product separate from purchased product that you resell. So there's record keeping ties into that, and bookkeeping. Very well worth the effort of keeping track of it, but it's I guess records are just here to stay, and sometimes they really help us, and sometimes. Well, it's good to hear Jacob saying the more you put into these programs, the more you get out, and it's true. But for myself, I find it hard to get over that threshold of putting enough in to make it worthwhile. The cost share programs, I thought they've been taken advantage of a few of them, but we always found them to be more of a invitation to overextend than being really helpful. And yeah, several times a year, I think a lot of other beekeepers find this too. We wonder if it's really even worth being in the industry. If the honey doesn't come in, we've just spent our summer picking stuff up and putting it down for nothing. But we keep on. And on to the hive notes. Our seasonal notes we write in the lids in that year's color, and we have a little dot on the front indicating the queen status. And then I have a duotang, which I write the rest of the notes in. Here's Erica's Do Not Die Juice recipe. Yeah, brains are 85% water, back to that hydration. Don't drink too much coffee. Drink water or good electrolyte juices. Hydration in the summer is a huge part of getting through the season happily, and I think it's good for your joints, your muscles, your brain, your relationships. Really, really good. So thanks for coming into New Hamburg. It's really neat to have this in our corner of the, well, we're really not a corner, in this part of the province.